Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Stories with Raquel Russell. I'm your host, Raquel. Thank you for joining me today. Make sure that you grab your favorite drink, turn up the volume, because this is a show where we talk about what's in the news, what's in culture, and stories that are inspiring change. You don't want to miss this great conversation. Welcome back to Talking Stories. It is your girl, Raquel. I am so glad that you're here. If you are new to the show, thank you for being here. My name is Raquel. I'm a multimedia storyteller, and I grew up surrounded by stories, and that has shaped all the work that I do today in communications as a freelancer. It's my bread and butter, and I try to translate that into this show where we talk to different people. We get into the news, what's happening in headlines, what's happening in fandom culture. I'm a huge nerd. And I want this to be a place where you feel welcome. And I want everybody who's returning to continue to just feel that we're building something important here. So again, if you are enjoying this show, please do feel free to review and to subscribe, and let me know how we can continue to be a better place for you. Again, so grateful to all of you who tuned into our last week's episode and liked and watched on YouTube. That is very encouraging to see. Some personal updates. There's been some changes in my life. I am starting a new job. As when the week of this posting, I will have about 1 week to my new job. And it's exciting, it's thrilling. There's a lot of emotions that I'm going through. It's hard to, how do you say, like, saying goodbye to a whole chapter of my adult life is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Uh, and I think I have a issue with letting go to some respect. I mean, I guess it makes sense because I'm low-key a hoarder, not in a scary way, don't worry. But do I? Anyways, no, I'm joking. But learning to let go is definitely something that I'm learning, especially with tasks and as a social media manager. Anyone who's a social media manager, when you manage channels and make them grow, it's like your child is leaving your hands, and it's hitting me. It's hitting me on a different level. But outside of that personal update, we've got a great show for you. I'm speaking with my friend and acquaintance from university days, Caitlin. Caitlin is a journalist. They're a carpenter, and she also does a lot of great work in the community and great storytelling, important work that needs to be done. So we have a really great conversation. He just really went into the different parts that make up Caitlin and what they're shaping their life to be and what they find important. So I hope that you enjoy the conversation and get something out of it. There's going to be links in the show notes description with articles that Caitlin references in our conversation. And I hope that you're able to go and pursue them for further reading. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the conversation that I got to have with Caitlin. Caitlin, welcome to Talking Stories. How are you doing? And first off, what is your drink of choice today?
I'm doing well. My drink of choice today is a black tea
Come on.
with brown sugar
Ooh,
and oh man, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's milk in a can. Um, that's not condensed milk.
oh,
Uh,
okay. All right.
it's what's it called?
Coconut milk?
Carnation milk. That's what it's called.
Carnation milk. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like that's every carnation milk is in like every West Indian's home, I feel like. I mean, if it's not, no shade, no tea, not dragging you, you're still very much whoever you are. But I feel like most of us have it. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for being here today. Um, we're going to have a conversation just talking about your journey, your relation to storytelling. But I also want to make sure to just give people an idea of who you are and how I know you. But I want to first let you have the floor. Can you introduce who Caitlin is? How do you define yourself? And how you show up in the world?
So my name is Caitlin. I toggle between an A and an E, and sometimes I like to use both.
Come on.
Um, how I toggle between the worlds, um, has a lot to do, I think, with like how I've experienced living what I look like, whilst also being surrounded by intersectionalities that may not really make sense to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But I think that they, like, on a grand scale, kind of, really make up who I am, and I get to like pluck at different strings at different times to add to my work with. On a like more general note, I am a freelance journalist in Toronto. I live in Scarborough. I was born and raised here.
Scarborough.
Yeah, that plug is going to be shameless. Um, and I want people to fight me on it.
Scarborough strong.
Oh no. But yeah, I work for an online company right now called New Canadian Media. We focus on news and immigration, so filling in a gap in ethnic media in Canada, considering so much of it is just legacy. And that's really what we've like, even at the school level, are standardized by. But yeah, I do data graphics and analysis, which I never thought I'd be doing, but I really enjoy. I have a calculator.
What?
Yeah, I use a calculator. I mean, I did like get into it, not in a journalism aspect. Like I got into data analysis and like interest there because of carpentry.
Yeah.
And like, needing to know how to do numbers really quickly in my head under the pressure of like very old white men. So, I think, yeah, that's what I do. That's who I am. And that's what I toggle between.
Yo, okay, so and let me just remind everybody, we try to make this podcast feel like home for you. So I'm honestly catching up with Caitlin. Caitlin and I haven't been able to sit down in a minute, but I want you to also get to hear their story. So one thing that I'm taking from that you just said, Caitlin, is the talk about like calculating stuff in your head. Because the one line that I've been using like since exiting J school, where we actually met, was the idea that I went to J school for a reason and math was not one of them. You are bucking that stereotype, and I'm very happy for you. What got you into carpentry? Because I was going through, what some of your recent bios, and that's something that really stood out to me. My dad is a carpenter. His dad was a carpenter, and I know it takes a special kind of person and skill set to be able to do that. We'll get back to journalism as well, but that I want to get into as well.
Best behavior. I got into it because I didn't think that I could make it in journalism. So I tried a bunch of different things. I did carpentry because I think it's like an excellent skill just to have. You show up to a site and like you're like, all right, I have skills. I know how to hook you up for electricity. I know how to help you live off grid. We can set up housing here if you need it. And like with a very specific focus on building on indigenous land claim fronts. Because it is important to create like shelter. You need those, especially in the winter time.
Yeah, we have real winters here.
But yeah, carpentry was like a big deal because it's such a closed environment, I think. And that is not like necessarily something that is helpful to gatekeep. Like it's just an essential skill.
Right.
So yeah, that's where I went. But on my worst behavior, Jesus, because he was a carpenter. Okay.
Why is that your worst behavior? Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Well, actually, that's a great segue into like how we got to know each other. So Caitlin and I, we actually went to the same journalism program together. We went to U of T Scarborough. It was a joint program at Centennial College. And there we did our Bachelor of Arts with a specialist in journalism. And I think I remember that specialist thing being a note of controversy at some point, like specialism versus like major. I don't know. Anyways, but
It was an honors bachelor, just so
honors
you know.
bachelor.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Yes, get it. You get it.
Let's make sure we don't get that twisted because it looks
So
very
much
shiny
money
on
for this
LinkedIn.
piece of paper that just melted. I can't.
Yeah, a lot of money. And we got to interact a lot through our friend groups, through our class projects. And one thing that I always admired about Caitlin, to this day, I still admire it about you, is the fact that you just continue to pursue what it is that you are actually passionate about. And when it's something that doesn't necessarily align with your vision for yourself, like how do I word it? Like, you're honest in that process of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And that's something I've appreciated, where I didn't feel like you were always putting on a face. Now, that might not be what you feel like you were experiencing, but I did appreciate that authenticity in you and like feeling your feelings in the moment as you were exploring the different avenues of journalism, the different cons, I guess you could say, or where it might, like, just those different things. I always appreciated that you were present in your emotions. I don't know if that makes sense, but thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate that because people say that I have too many, and I'm like,
I don't think you can ever have too many emotions. I think that's what makes us who we are. And it's like
yeah.
the journey of like plucking it out, like as you were saying, talking about earlier, and just toggling between what you keep for who you are and what you don't keep for who you are. But I wonder, do you remember how we met? Because honestly, I can't. And I was saying this to Vivian in our last episode, which you should check out if you haven't, listeners, that I'm having a hard time remembering like the moments I meet people. Like one of our friends, Renee, she's probably one of the few people that I remember meeting, and only more because she reminded me of the story. So now I've been able to fill in like the gaps of like, oh yeah, that's how we first met. Right. Yes, I remember that moment. But I think for me, my earliest impressions were that we both came from like similar backgrounds. That's why I said the segue, like in terms of we came from like religious backgrounds into a journalism program and like figuring out like who we were in relationship to the stories that we were telling, biases that we had to be aware of. That was my earliest impression. How about you?
Yeah, the biggest bias being like the color of your skin. But that I think is something that I've spent a lot of time working on. Just because there are like reconcilable differences in my own background that I bring not only to the table, but also like just carry with me everywhere I go. But yeah, I do remember when we first met. I was sitting in like the second or third, it was the second row, because I was that kid that sat in either the first row or the back row.
Nothing wrong with that.
There was no in between. So yeah, I was trying to, I think, either staple some project that we had to hand in that day, and you and Renee and Belisha all sat in like the third row in the middle. I remember like watching you and being like, it's the cool group.
What? Sorry, that was so loud. I'm sorry for anyone wearing their headphones. What?
And I was like, they have a stapler, but I was so nervous to go over there, and I'm like, hey, you got a stapler? I don't think I did that. I think I was
I
like,
don't
hey,
remember
you
that.
guys, I'm so sorry to bother you, but like, could I use your stapler? And
Yeah.
you were like, yeah, you were just so welcoming and inviting. And I was like, oh, dang, this person is nice. But like, isn't, you know how like sometimes nice people can like raise a red flag? It's like, that
Yes.
person really wants something from me and they're
Yes.
just being extra nice. No, that was not you. You genuinely were just like, just so happy to be present. And I was like, who
Before
are
the
the
world crushed me. Oh my goodness. Okay, it's so similar to Renee. as you say that story, I'm coloring in the room that we were in. Like I can see it now, the humanities wing room that had like that weird
Yeah, yeah.
slanted roof.
No sense.
And I think that's where I think that was Jeffrey's class, right? Yeah, because yeah, it was slanted and he was at the front. Yeah, anyways, okay. The lines are filling in for me. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Yeah, that was an amazing at least for me, what I enjoyed about that first year of the program was seeing different faces like mine and backgrounds similar to me of wanting to do this storytelling. Like, I mean, I've talked about it on the show before, so I won't belabor it, but there was a lot of points for me through the program where I think I was reminded that there were some obstacles to me going further in the journalism field, specifically broadcast, because I really wanted to do broadcast at the time. And, just ideas about my hair, my skin tone, like my body size. Like there's so many things where I was like, and actually it's funny because it's similar to when I wanted to be an actor as a kid. Like going out of high school, honestly, if I'd been braver, I would have gone into acting. But those things also rang in my head of like, will I ever be able to get roles because I don't fit these looks that people are looking for? And with broadcast journalism, it was the same thing where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to fit. And, at some points I was told by guest speakers that I wouldn't necessarily fit, or I would have to get like someone else to do my hair, or things like that. So that was something that I was always reminded of going through the program. And if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, well, I just curious what your experience was going through the journalism program and what you hope that people who are interested in looking into journalism programs, what you would hope that they would look for in a good program.
Hmm. I think the like largest telltale sign of like, and I will be very blunt about this, but it was like it's discrimination. Our field is very old, it's very white, and it's very male, and it's changing and it's becoming very old, very white, and very female. Um, and so, where in the newsroom do we have space? And people who have studied this, like the Canadian Association of Journalists, did a study about diversity in newsrooms, and a third of all Canadian newsrooms that were contacted like participated. And they found
Wow.
that when people of color, because that tends to be the mark by which we fill quotas in this industry, are clustered
Mm-hmm.
into like behind the scenes. So you have folks over generations, behind cameras, specifically, but then you also have people behind like the computer. So you have folks of like diverse backgrounds on the back end, whilst also filling up space like on screen. So like on the front end, I would call it,
Yeah.
just to like, push those agendas forward. Not to say that those people like are, brilliant and should be like able to talk about their work regardless of their color. Um, that is still the number one thing that I deal with and talk about. Um, but the one thing that I distinctly remember was working on a group project. And I was only working with one other person. And this was early in the program, so like
Mm-hmm.
first or second year.
Okay.
Uh, and I didn't agree with what the two men in the room were saying. So the older man told me to stop talking so that
Hmm.
the other man in the room could start or talk even more. Like, I don't
Oof.
know. I just have a hard time um, letting people discuss things in front of me that concern me without me.
Right.
Um,
Of course.
but yeah, I've spent a while. I think has been something that I wanted to talk about like on
Mm-hmm.
here was I am spending less time listening to men. Um,
Mm.
simply because I am also like a part of me is kind of regendering masculinity.
Yeah.
Because, when you walk like a line and identify more with either one, or even with neither. It's just like a personal like identity, and I'm
Yes.
still struggling to figure out that language. I think younger people tend to have a better handle on it.
Fair. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I forgot what I was talking about.
Well, if it helps, can we go back, and I just want to make sure to break that down for people who might be unfamiliar, uninitiated with certain language. What do you mean when you say um oh, now I'm blanking. You said
I said I don't want to listen
regendering.
to men anymore. And then regendering
Yeah.
masculinity
Yes.
is like, and I think it takes a lot of brain power, and it is
Yes.
9:30. Um,
Oh
I'm
my
supposed
goodness.
to be up for 4 hours, but an hour. I've been up for an hour maybe. Like so, but
Fair.
yeah.
Yes, it's morning.
Um, yeah, I think like yeah, I'm spending less time listening to men, so that I can understand the male voice in my own head.
Fair. Okay.
And that's what I meant by that. But yeah, that was one of the larger issues I think in the program was we were also being taught by people who had been in the industry for so long. I remember reading someone who was in like our program, the Centennial College program, but then they just did the college level, but they graduated a year after us, and they wrote an article called "Never Have I Ever Not Had a White Professor."
I have to go
And
Google that.
yeah, I can send it to you if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's great. I think that it's kind of like very telling,
Yeah.
um, because we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we also like talk about or have talked about it needing to be at an educational level.
Yes.
And now I'm kind of wondering when the conversations turn a little bit more radical.
Right.
Um,
I know what do you mean by
so
that.
just bringing into space what it means for us to hold space, take up space. Like, I am of the impression that if I'm in a room, like, we've met our quota of white folks.
Mm,
So for anyone who doesn't know that, I am half white. So that's where I get it from. Which might, sound really like bitter and sour on the tongue for folks. But yeah, I want to see like BIPOC only spaces and how we build community there. Um, and what it means to like intersect, especially with people who are mixed, either well, between European colonizer and the colonized, or people with mixed ethnicities and how those interchange and play. And that's not really the space I think that was really like prominent in our journalism program, but it was definitely something that I was able to explore at the university level. Um, from Manel. Manel was really great.
I was just talking about her 2 episodes ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Manel, Dr. Manel Matani.
Yes. I think what was really nice about making that relationship was so that I'm having people who are younger than me coming out of high school asking, what kind of future is in the fields. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there are some really great folks who have been doing this work for a long time. And it can help set up, those circles
Yeah.
of community, especially when those like young people are like trans and non-binary
Hmm.
folks. Because I mean, we're in the statistics, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like 0.1%. It's there, but like, is it there for show, or are we actually like getting to do the work that we want to
Right.
do?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That and I think like there's been a couple of spaces that have come up in the last couple of years. There's a Facebook group for I think if I'm remembering, it's a kind of BIPOC journalism group on Facebook. I know there's different spaces where people are finding their community, and I think that's the biggest saving grace, at least from the experience in that program, and even outside of it now in our different careers, is identifying people that can help you to go further, and identifying people that can speak life into you when it feels like the system is just totally against you. Because I think that's one thing that, you know, through our experiences, good and bad, in our program, like we were able to, at least again from my perspective, find pockets of being able to lean on each other and know that we weren't experiencing things totally in silos. And that's, without the risk of sounding cliche, I think the strength in numbers and hearing about people's experiences. And that's why I really enjoy hearing about people's stories and how they're navigating things through this podcast and other podcasts that I love listening to, because no one's telling a lie when it's like, it makes you feel like you're less alone. Because I think when someone hears your story, that it's something for them to be able to say, oh, I can go and still try to pursue things in journalism. I'm looking at my identity, trying to put together the pieces of who I am, and that work can be done in this field. And I think that brings me to your recent article, but your recent place where you're working right now, New Canadian Media. And can you tell me what interested you in working with this team and doing the stories that you're currently doing?
So I started with NCM over the summer as an editorial assistant as part of the local journalism initiative, which is supposed to help push for EDI, so equity, diversion, and inclusion in newsrooms. And it also creates, or it's supposed to help even the leveling, like the playing field, especially for like smaller publications. So NCM is like growing, it's nationwide. So they cover news all across Canada.
Amazing.
And we have different affiliates with other like press in certain areas like Winnipeg or BC. And so I kind of really, I think, hung on to an identity that I don't think I've ever really been able to like have access to. And I didn't really want that. Like, I think that my personal conversation with myself is something that I keep out of my stories. And it's something that I've been like told to do a little bit more, I think, just because I have such strong views on certain things. Um, and I think that's been great, and that's been super helpful for me to develop a voice of narrative that is palatable to people when for a really long time I felt unpalatable. Um, Bigger picture, I see channels to go down, particularly in visual representation, that I think NCM has kind of corresponded with me and understands where I'm coming from, because we share that understanding that media in Canada is evolving.
Yes.
And the gatekeeping process of how we publish, who publishes, what we get to write about, is something that I think NCM and other news organizations like them are trying to break down a little bit. We do very much keep to that CP style, though. So when I read through their articles, we touch on immigration policy quite often. And that can be difficult language to unpack. So, when we do that, it's important to make sure that you are actually saying the thing that's being said
Right.
in that policy, by that government. But yeah, going further down, it's been an incredibly healthy working environment for me, which is nice and new. I'm not getting yelled at about something that I didn't do,
Yeah.
which happened on some construction sites. But yeah.
You seem
Uh,
much happier, and I think that's something that I noticed, like even in your post when you were talking about getting the job working at New Canadian Media. I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Like I could feel the happiness or like the optimism, if that's a better word. And just for people who are uninitiated, sorry, CP is Canadian Press Style Guide. It is what governs a lot of our grammatical structure, our spelling structure, the choices that we make in terms of how copy is laid out. I feel like I talk about CP style every week with my work study students. Like, if you don't know, you don't know. It's
and
so
it's
interesting.
annoying because it's not even like, because I don't want to stay in Canada. I
Yeah,
think Canadian news is like very, it's tight. And to be able to write anything like beyond like investigative work is not well funded.
mm,
I remember researching for gender and sexual diversity presentation that I gave with NCM, looking at how media talk about trans and non-binary people. And I was like, dang, y'all don't know what you're doing. Drawing conclusions from things that like from a community that A has been through so much violence,
right,
B has passed since the article that you're releasing about them, disrespecting them in death, like not acceptable. And C, like trying to tie healthcare to a child who is transitioning is not a consensual practice
mm,
from media. And I think that's a lot of where the issue is when we do reporting, not just in those communities, but
yeah,
also as like those communities show visibly in
right,
social circles.
right,
So this past municipal elections, the first outwardly trans woman was elected to the school board of trustees in Ottawa this past municipal election. And their name is Lyra Evans. And how we report on them is going to be heavily influenced, I think, by like a very cisgendered understanding of how to report.
right,
Um, adding they them to articles a lot of the time, in writing, um, I think is hard language for some folks to understand because I know in my own family, like when I've reported on someone's pronouns, when it's they, they're like, "Are you talking about more than one person?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but also
right.
kind of." Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of nuance,
yes.
but important nuance to have a discussion on. Yeah.
And English is the worst language to try to draw that out in. Um, yeah. So, but yeah, I am excited to see where it goes. I don't know if that answered your
Yes,
question.
it did. And if you can, I'll make a note as well, but I'd love for us to put in the show notes if it's something you're comfortable with, the presentation that you did about media and how it covers trans and non-binary folks in storytelling. So that'd be great for our audience if you want further reading to go and look into that. I realized that we need to back up a little bit because I didn't get into like what is the thing that, inspired you to get into being a storyteller? What, interested you in this field?
Narnia.
Are you serious? This is perfect.
I I went to a private school, and we instead of homeroom we had devotions.
Ah, yes.
And like not like feel good devotions, like the wrath of God kind of thing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I got so overwhelmed, I think, by this like really depressing feeling that
Mm,
I was gonna go to hell. And I was fine with it. So
I should be
uh
laughing.
I would sit in the back of the class. Although I did do my work. Like we actually had a Bible class
Yeah.
and my friends would cheat off of me. So I was also like I complain about it the most, but I was also the biggest loser because I was like, I need to like prove that I'm a good Christian, and I did it. I did it. Um
You're so sweet.
I mean, I never like, I think one of my big things was like, you know what, this is kind of stupid. Like, we're not actually learning anything. If people wanted to learn about the Bible, they can go to church for free on Sunday. Like, you
Not
don't need to
this.
pay thousands of dollars to learn about the Bible here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I would sit at the back of Miss Brower's class and write fan fiction about
How old were you?
Narnia. Grade 7 and 8, so
I feel like we have the same
13,
soul. This is
14.
so funny. Continue.
Um, so yeah, I would uh be the bad butt princess. But like I kind of had like a more masculine like look. Like I wore pants and they were skin tight and they were leather and I had the like those gloves.
Yeah.
Like I would always have the gloves where you could put your thumb through.
Yes. The Avril Lavigne gloves.
Yeah, okay, that's what we're gonna call them. But yeah, I I wasn't allowed to wear them
Yeah.
because they weren't part of my uniform, so they'd get really mad. But like I would cover them up whenever I could because I knew which teachers would be
Yeah.
like,
You're
you have
okay.
to take those off. But yeah, I would sit at the back of class and I would write about being a really cool forest creature and that Skander Canes was going to be
Oh my
my
God.
partner and lover in
Wait,
crime
Skander
and
Kane's
that
as an Edmund?
mhm,
Edmund C?
mhm. And Lucy was just the sister that would love me forever and I would
Yeah.
be a part of their family and all would be well in the world. So yeah, that's how I got into
Oh my gosh. Okay, before I ask you for the part two, like
story.
one, if you're not watching on YouTube, you should watch on YouTube because you need to see Caitlin's amazing Trinidadian earrings that she's wearing that they're wearing. And then two,
I'm sorry.
I also like I think it was grade 6. I wrote my first quote unquote book. It started as an EQAO assignment. I think that's what it was called, EQAO, the
Yeah,
writing
the
portion.
standardized, yeah.
Yeah.
Thing.
And I got in trouble because I wasn't finished. Like I kept writing because I was making it longer than the assignment. And it eventually, like, I think I low-key became known for this in middle school at Earnscliffe, my art school, loved it. But I low-key became known for having written a book based on the EQAO assignment. And honestly, I didn't have the words for it at that point. This was before I got hardcore into like Twilight fan fiction, but it was basically a fan fiction because it was Susan Pevensy's son who got into another world between of the wood between the worlds. I don't know if I should say all this out loud because I could probably make some money
Sorry, are
somehow.
you talking about the pools? Like the
Yes.
CS?
So
Okay.
they found another world and Susan's son went there and then discovered this powerful like Black woman who can control like fire, water, and like that's where my one of my email things, Rowan, that's where it comes from because that's where the character that I named her, like her name was Rowan. But yes, I
Like
just had
from
to mention that.
okay. So first of all, fire water.
Yes.
Um, explain.
Okay, so basically, I think actually there was a couple of components that were inspiring me at that point because I really liked fire and like people being able to control fire, but I wanted it to visually look like water, like descending, like when you're wanting to attack someone. So think about Avatar: The Last Airbender, Katara, when she has like the water going, but now imagine that's fire. Like I even did a pottery assignment that we had, and I did a sculpture of her with the water at the base of her rising up. Like it was so serious. And part of my whole thing with Susan's son being like the conduit in there is I always hated the ending that C.S. Lewis did. Like even at that young age, not being like familiar with like any like feminist literature or anything like that, but the idea that Susan wasn't able to get back into Narnia because she started liking makeup and boys and like you punished her for that. Like, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
mean? She's not worthy because she's interested in these other like what? So and maybe this is a patriarchal lens where I was like her son was the one who was able to get back in. I mean, eventually she does make an appearance in like the second book that I had. Like I start like looking at her life in London and I was like, okay, how am I going to bring her back into like Narnia and whatever? But anyways, I could talk about this.
Heck yeah. I'm here for it. That's cool. I'm so proud of you.
Oh my gosh, I'm proud of you. Let's get back to you because I love the fan fiction in the back in the room in your private school. And again,
Yeah.
I say same school because I went to private school till grade 2, Christian
Okay.
private school as well. But yeah, like what about after, like was that like, did you continue building that story like I did where it became
No.
this mammoth, or like what continued to propel you?
No, I think high school crushed me.
Mm,
Um, but it was like there were pretty high points as well. So, when I was in grade 7 or 8, we did a Bollywood play. So we were the first people in my school historically to put on an all brown like girls production.
yeah.
Um, that was a lot of fun. Like I just remember also like loving theater. Like when we
Yeah.
had the money for theater. I also remember having like creative differences with someone in high school um about like a play that we were working on just for like drama class.
Yeah.
But like I wanted to go full core metal,
Yeah.
and they were like stepping back from it. I'm like, no, no, this is a horror scene. Like you
There
need the
will be
music
gore.
there. Yeah. But it wasn't gore. Like we didn't do anything. It was just haunting. Like I
Yeah.
think that's like a really great way to describe a lot of like my writing is just haunted.
Mm,
Um,
fair. Come on.
um, but yeah, and then I got picked to present a play that I had submitted in grade 10, and I was the only grade 10 got to put their production on for the end of the year play. Thank you.
Come on.
And then in grade 11, I was really nervous because they changed the rules
Hmm.
and you had to take math.
Yeah.
I was like, no. So I had to take math and I hated math. My teacher was so mean to me. She would stand at the front of the class and call me stupid. I'm like,
Oh
well,
no. I'm so sorry.
it's fine. I'm so good at math now. Like,
Well, yeah, that's right.
but yeah, it's about who you have like to mentor you and to
Yeah.
teach you these things because again, we keep gatekeeping education and knowledge, whatever. We'll just deal with it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, grade 12 is when I really stepped into the light and like um I got into all the schools that I applied to. I graduated. People hated that. I remember my
What? What do you mean?
principal, yeah,
Yeah.
my principal gave me my diploma and he held on to me like for longer than he was supposed to. And I find men do this quite often, when they want like a word with me. But he like held on to my diploma like he wasn't gonna give it to me. And he's like, I didn't think I'd give this to you. And I'm like, oh, you little snake. He was just mad. He was just mad because I called him out. Um,
Oh
we
my
had
gosh.
want to tell the story because I love the story. We had we had to go to this chapel
Yeah.
every Wednesday. And again,
You
if
went
you
to Christian school all through high school? Sorry, let me just
yeah, I
clarify.
went to the same school for 14 years. Uh,
Oh, that gives a lot more context. Okay, continue, continue.
yeah, it explains a lot
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. No, no, no. All good.
Like again, if you want to learn about God, you can go to church on Sunday for
Hmm.
free.
Hmm.
Um, but like every Wednesday we had to go to chapel and they would make us like wear a different shirt like in order to get in. And so we would like sneak out and go to the mall that was like down the street. And I remember being the last one out of the washroom and I got caught and everybody else escaped. And I was sent to the principal's office and I stayed there. I missed chapel, so I'm fine. Um, but yeah, I went to the principal's office and he's like, if you don't tell me who like left, I'm gonna have to suspend you. And I'm like, do it then. Like, what do you
You
want?
said
I'm not gonna
that?
tell. Yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna tell you who it was. And I remember feeling really, really hot and like very nervous because I was like,
Yeah.
that goes on your permanent record, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I went home and I told my mom, and she's like, "Oh, hell no!" And
Yeah.
she grabbed her white husband, she sat him down, and he didn't say a word. My mom just chewed him out for like a good hour, and he apologized to me,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
which was
Wow.
pretty
Come on, mama.
yeah. Um, but yeah, it was going back to the storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the audacity that um, that I think training women inspire in their children shouldn't be played with.
Yeah.
Um, so
Absolutely. Don't play.
yeah, and I think like a lot of that personality comes out in my writing because um, it's I don't know. We talk about objectivity all the time in journalism, and the only thing that is objective, like that I can like critically see being defined and demanded of by the industry is you have to be white. Like you have to
Mm,
be lighter skinned. And I think like I use the privileges that I have to my advantage. Um, because I know my name is very anglicized, right? And
right.
tends to not work in my favor when I'm trying to get a job. But if
Mm,
I'm trying to get an interview, I get the interview.
right.
Know what I mean? And I think people's biases going into the interview, and I do like to do things like either in person, or over the screen. Because when people like I've literally seen people see my name and then they jump because they had no
When they see
idea.
you.
Mm. Um, but I love that. I love that.
The little Caitlin from like
Yeah, I,
the drama story was like, yeah, no, it was great.
I'm just out here to catch people. I think what sucks about, visibly melanin people going and bodies going into very white spaces is we spend more time trying to call the industry out than getting the answers from the people that we are historically supposed to have access to in this
Right.
industry,
Right.
and asking them the questions that we really want to.
Right.
So I'd like to refocus and maybe start caring more about like what we ask our sources, and having the backup from our editorial team. But yeah, I work with really great people,
Hmm.
regardless of like ethnicity or background, simply because we all kind of understand the ideological mindset.
Right.
Um,
Like the mission behind the stories that you're telling.
yeah, it's to fill a gap, and it's supposed to be a bridge of communication for legacy news. So, not gate. I mean, I personally would call it gatekeeping the gatekeepers,
Hmm.
but I don't think that that's the message that NCM really has. I think NCM is about opening communication,
Right.
and participating, and growing its collective. So it's a very friendly environment.
I love that for you. I love that for you. It
Thanks.
sounds like a healthy environment. And just to make sure I tease back, so I know that you talked about, you know, the storytelling opportunities that you had going through through high school specifically, but what was the thing that said I want to apply to journalism programs? Because you said you applied to all the programs and you got in. Were they all journalism programs? Like what about journalism stood out for you?
I think about this a lot. Because it's been a decade since I left
Yeah.
high school,
Yeah.
and I was supposed to go and be Dr. Temperance Brennan from Bones. I wanted to be a forensic anthropologist.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay.
Really holding on to like the like autistic presenting
Yeah.
characters in TV shows. But yeah, Dr. Temperance Brennan, just because like smartest person in the room and knew exactly what to say at every time.
Yeah.
And having that confidence is something that I really struggled with. And continue to, but like I want to be able to enter a room and say dot 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 blah 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 and be absolutely right.
Right.
Um yeah, I wanted to be Temperance Brennan, but like have to work as hard as Kelly Kapoor.
Okay.
So
Okay. Oh my gosh.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
And then yeah, I got in. I was supposed to go to master. We like toured the grounds and everything, and my mom was just on the verge of like tears.
Oh.
She's like, "I'm gonna lose my baby." Like,
Oh.
wanted to leave for so long. Like I haven't wanted to live. Like I wanted to live on my own since I was like
Yeah.
14. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I love that idea. In praxis. In practice, it's a little harder, especially in Toronto where it's so
Oh yeah.
expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I journalism was my backup. And then I got in and I was like, I want to follow my dreams and write for a living. And I'm still learning on how to say that with more excitement.
Okay, you want to write for a living. That is the
Yes.
thing that you were trying to say with more excitement. Okay.
If-
What stories have been carrying you through this season? It's been an interesting couple of years. It's been an interesting year. I know that you're doing excellent and inspiring work, but what stories have you been hearing that are things that encourage you in your day to day?
that encourage me.
Yeah. Or
Oh,
carrying you through, if that's a
mm,
better way to framing it.
um, my dog mainly carries me through.
Okay.
But like stories, I think I did a lot of research on police violence,
Say again.
police violence,
Police violence. Yeah.
in Toronto because I took up some work with different social justice movements, um, over the pandemic, and TPS in Scarborough
Mm-hmm.
are run very different than, downtown core, where you have communities that are close geographically to each other, and that can help mobilize. But doing research on like police violence here in Scarborough has been it's felt isolating.
Hmm.
Just because, you know, searching through an SIU database and with the keyword Scarborough, there are pieces missing,
Hmm.
from, the people who are supposed to be holding police accountable, and nobody really to ask those questions to, or have like the backup, to push people to answer your questions or to help you keep mentally sane. Because when you are researching, um, activating topics, that can be something that draws like emotional exhaustion out of your reporters,
Yeah.
especially if they've also experienced it.
Hmm.
Um, but like there is such a fire in me to keep doing that work. It happens in chunks,
Hmm.
which is frustrating because you're also taking care of other people who have experienced police violence, right? So it's about creating boundaries, but also respecting other people's and making sure that like if you're asking for their presence, like people who have experienced police violence, if you're asking for their presence, that it needs to be consistent.
Right.
Consistency is the thing that breaks when you encounter police as a racialized body. You lose not lose, this is the wrong word, but there is like a disconnection
Right.
between the things that your body physiologically just knows how to do
Hmm.
and now doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, and you have to retrain your body. And that's not a system that I think is fair. But yeah, doing that work and like finding and the numbers to prove, my points, or like following the numbers is a lot of what I do. So I think those are encouraging to me.
It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you gonna say something?
Mm-mm.
In the time we have left, because I do want to make sure to respect your time, and I know we're over. I just want to get to a couple of things. First, your new article that you wrote recently, new research challenges Toronto's claims to success and diversity. I'm going to include that in the show notes for anyone who's listening. You co-wrote this with Fernando Arce. Apologies if I'm saying the last name incorrectly. But I just recently read it. I found it a thrilling read in terms of talking about the makeup of the city, what's been changing municipally. I didn't even click for me like the borders changing or the regions changing, what I hate that would have on having more faces, more diverse faces and bodies in Toronto City Hall. And can you just talk to me? Oh my goodness, how am I running out of time? Okay, wait. Let me say that sentence again. Can you talk to me a bit about what went into this story and why it was important for this story to be told?
So the first issue I think that we had to tackle was how we define diversity. And that's why the assistant professor, Shana Almeida, was really helpful because there is a spectrum that we kind of oscillate on when we talk about diversity at a policy level. And that's whether you're, complicit in it. That's not correct.
So yeah.
I have it written down,
Yeah.
but it's, you're either fighting with racism or you're saying it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Um, and doing that, I think what I got lost in was the way that we define diversity isn't just about, the visibility of representation, because
Right.
that's where we focused so much on.
Right.
But having racialized players does not necessarily mean that they're representing diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, people of different gender and sexualities.
Mm-hmm.
The highest percentage of women on city council actually fell under Rob Ford. Yeah, 60% of his council was women, and in a 20-year review, it was the highest concentration that Toronto City Council had ever
Wow,
seen.
wow, 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 wow.
Yeah, which didn't really always reflect in Rob Ford's policy making,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So just, that again, it's in the numbers 100%, but do the numbers really reflect the
Hmm.
ideological um, evaluation of what diversity means?
Right.
Um, so yeah, it was the first part was to track down how we understand diversity and define it, how we have to reevaluate it, what that means for new sitting councilors. They've run campaigns in communities that are double the size that they were before 2018.
Mm.
And quite a few of them, you know, and when I say quite a few, I mean, like, I'm talking like less than 10
Yeah.
bodies that are like racialized or ideologically, um, progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so those folks are pushing for policies that actually revolve around the community that they're representing. So people who are in community housing, people who take transit, people who rent or live in rooming houses. Our largest growing population in Toronto, within our racialized communities, are newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that we're doing to respect their ability to participate in municipal politics, considering that the provincial government regulated election day in Toronto on the date of Diwali?
That was such a miss. Oh my goodness. Yeah, sorry. Go on. Yep.
I
Yeah.
love that. You. Um, but yeah, so that we had to take into consideration. So the previous years, in 2018, they were running historic numbers of racialized people, newcomers, or people who are like second generation. So it
Mm-hmm.
was focused on like a wider berth of diversity than Toronto City Council has ever accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
And, another part of that was having to listen and research, John Tory and Doug Ford, and the way that municipal, provincial politics run together.
Yeah.
Because yeah, Doug Ford used the notwithstanding clause to invoke cutting down council from 47 to 25 wards,
Right.
right? And you essentially like, sorry, that's my dog.
You're good. You were talking about the notwithstanding clause,
Yeah,
and
because that happened. That happened again, this year with the teachers union. They threatened to, like, when I say they, I mean Doug Ford threatened to use the notwithstanding clause against teachers and an entire like labor force. So I'm talking private and public sector, multi-industry, so including steel workers. They came and they wanted to stand in solidarity with the teachers and were like, if you revoke their right to strike, then we're going to do our part to support teachers.
right.
And anytime that there's like a labor movement, I find in Ontario specifically, because we find our teachers, I think, taking up quite a bit of airspace heading into negotiations with our province, which you don't hear as much from other provinces, or as widely like spoken about.
Fair. Yeah.
I think, that is a kind of like a center mold, I think, for growing further discussion on how we continue to progress forward.
Beautiful. No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Last question on the article, and then we'll switch into some rapid fire, and I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
Okay. No, you're great. So if there's one thing that you would like people to take away from your recent article, what would it be?
Critical. Be critical. I have always been like skeptical. But I think moving that into critical lens, and yes, it's a difference in a couple of letters, switching them around. I know that doesn't actually help you understand the difference between skeptical and critical, but skeptical is somebody who doesn't believe a word anybody says. And I think that can be an issue, especially when survivors are telling their stories. And we're trying to understand the nuances or the intersecting personalities of what communities really need, and if Toronto Council is actually paying attention to those things. In Sheena Almeida's work, she found between 1975 and 2018 this process of recycling and regurgitating consultation processes. And finally in 2017, when Black Lives Matter Toronto said, no, we're not going to participate in these consultations with you, it was a way to challenge how city council and our representatives in politics, whatever level of government, are really paying attention to the things that they say that they are. So
to make sure to get, I've been trying to bring back this segment that I haven't done in a minute, rapid fire. So I wanted to ask you some really quick questions. You don't have to like think about it hard. Don't worry, you don't have to be married to this answer forever.
Okay.
But yeah, just to give some people some more to know about you. So how do you prefer to read your books, ebooks, or physical books?
Physical.
Okay, favorite writer.
Oh, me.
No. Yes.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Okay.
You said it's you, own it. Do you write to music or in silence?
Both.
Both. Okay. What is one book on your to read list? She's reaching over. I can't see it. Your screen's blurry.
Okay, it's called Warrior Life, Indigenous Resistance and Resurgence by Pamela Palmater.
Okay, come through. And then finally, how do you prefer to consume your stories? Books, films, or movies? Did I say films? I said, sorry, books, TV shows, or movies?
Oh, okay. Those are different genres. TVs are for anxiety, movies are for depression, books are for ADHD, and films are for fun, because film and movies are definitely different.
Okay.
and a
Okay,
career.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for indulging me in a rapid fire segment. I'm so glad to do it again. I haven't done it in a minute. But overall, thank you so much for being on the show, Caitlin, and your time. It is valuable. And I appreciate getting to know a little bit more about your journey, especially since J School and the things that you've been working on. So where can our audience find you, to find your work, to find you?
Okay, so right now I'm with newcanadianmedia.ca. You can look up my name, it's on the screen. We also have a mentorship program available to up and coming journalists or anyone that is a newcomer to Canada. So particularly folks who have experience back home or aren't able to find like bylines here. So we have a couple of really great and awesome mentors that will help guide you through the writing process. You get paid for all of your stories, and you get some industry insiders, industry insider information. So that's super great. And you can find that at our website as well. We're also offering journalism and media students free membership to our collective. So you get access to being assigned stories, you get paid for your work, hone your skills, as well as, get access to other professional developments because we do quite a few seminars. And yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm on Twitter. That we can put that in the show notes. Twitter. That's the only
That's
place.
the only
And
one, sure.
Mastodon.
And Mastodon. Yes, amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much, Caitlin. I appreciated your time. I'll chat with you soon. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Talking Stories. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to get I hope you were able to be inspired by the work that Caitlin's doing, and maybe even something that you can consider doing, communities that you can consider reaching out to, work that you can consider supporting. Journalism always needs support. Let me tell you, they always need support. So find a local paper, maybe subscribe, put a few coins in there. But anyways, thank you for joining us at Talking Stories. You can make sure to continue following us on social media and subscribe, review, let us know how you're enjoying the show, and stay tuned for next week's episode. I'm so glad to see you there. Looking forward to seeing you there. Keep living your truth, keep living your real, and always know that I'm rooting for you. Take care.